have a very normal sisterly relationship. We're very close, and we support each other and get each other's opinions.
The perfect marriage was just a myth. Inside their £15 million estate, Pippa Middleton's silent suffering reached a breaking point, and when Catherine found out, the future queen wept, already battling her own health crisis. Kate was blindsided by the truth. The sister who had stood by her side for years was trapped in a life of quiet despair. What Pippa finally revealed about James Matthews has rocked the royal family to its core. And now, one question echoes through the palace halls. What happens when loyalty meets betrayal? The cracks begin to show. It began with something small. A gate, a few polite signs. Nothing to worry about until those private, no public access warnings spread like quiet sentinels across Pippa and James Matthews' £15 million West Berkshire estate. At first glance, it was just another wealthy couple setting boundaries. But to those who had walked those country paths for generations, it felt like a silent declaration of war. Imagine strolling the same muddy trail for 50 years, passing hedgerows, nodding to neighbors, only to be stopped by a stiff metal gate and a laminated sign. One villager summed it up bitterly. They act like it's them against the rest of us. The contrast stung even more knowing that Sir Terence Conran, the beloved previous owner, had once opened these very fields to the community with warmth and generosity. But James wanted barriers. And this wasn't just about a blocked footpath. Behind the gates, something deeper had shifted. Friends whispered that James had changed. The ambitious, outgoing financier had become a man of silence, retreating behind tall fences and drawn curtains. Meanwhile, Pippa continued to attend charity galas and public events, still smiling for cameras. But that sparkle, it had dimmed. She arrived alone. Left alone, the once radiant socialite began to look stranded. Then came the real blow. In March 2025, James's dream of transforming Bucklebury Farm into a countryside nursery collapsed in full view of the public. Local officials slammed the brakes, citing significant concerns over traffic congestion and sustainability. The verdict wasn't just a rejection, it was a humiliation, not just in business, but in the very village that raised Pippa. For a man worth billion, sting wasn't financial. It was personal. It was reputation. But beneath the headlines and business filings, something more intimate was breaking. Each no trespassing sign James posted wasn't just keeping neighbors away. It was pushing Pippa further out of reach. The woman who grew up in a world of shared garden fences and village fates now lived in a fortress. And with each passing day, her world grew quieter, lonelier, because what no one saw was that the real loss wasn't a footpath or a failed farm. It was connection. It was closeness. It was love slipping quietly through the cracks of cold stone walls. And heartbreakingly, this was only the beginning, the secret history nobody talks about. October 2015. Remember that date, because that's when the first crack in the fairy tale quietly appeared. Before the wedding dress, before the vows, before the world had even begun to believe in their romance. Pippa Middleton, still publicly linked to her longtime boyfriend Nico Jackson, was photographed slipping out of James Matthews' London townhouse at dawn, holding a bouquet of red roses. Let that image settle for a moment. It wasn't just a sleepover. It was a signal. And for those who knew how to read between the lines, it spoke volumes. One insider would later whisper, "James has always been there. He's handsome, charming, magnetic. He never stopped carrying a torch for Pippa. Always a friend. Always in the background. Always waiting." Because James Matthews wasn't a fling. He was a fixture, a man who had quietly orbited Pippa's world for nearly a decade. 2007, they first crossed paths at his family's glittering Eden Rock Resort in St. Bart's. 2012, a brief spark while she was still dating cricketer Alex Loudon. Then Nico came along, and James, he simply waited, patient, persistent, watching the fairy tale from the wings, convinced he was the one meant to write the ending. And here's where it gets murky. The 8-year age gap might have seemed trivial on paper, but emotionally, it was everything. When they met, Pippa was still becoming. still shaping her voice, her future, her identity. James was already there, polished, powerful, utterly sure of himself. He didn't chase. He maneuvered. He positioned. He endured. Officially, Pippa and Nico blamed distance for their breakup. But was it really about time zones and missed calls? Or was it something closer to home? A magnetic pull she could no longer resist? A man who knew exactly when to show up with roses, exactly when to say the right thing, exactly how to fill the cracks Nico couldn't see. Make no mistake, the chemistry was real. Insane, as friends called it. But chemistry is lightning. It dazzles. It burns. It doesn't build foundations. It doesn't hold strong when the music fades and the masks come off. And what Pippa would come to learn, perhaps too late, is that the most intoxicating love stories often have the most dangerous beginnings. And this one was only just beginning to reveal its cost. The Matthews family scandals. Every family has secrets. The Matthews family, they have headlines. It all begins with tragedy so haunting. It became the silent heartbeat behind everything that followed. Michael Matthews, James' older brother, became the youngest Briton to summit Everest at just 22. A historic triumph, but it lasted only hours. On the descent, a sudden blizzard swallowed him whole. He vanished into the storm, never to be seen again. His body was never recovered. The family poured grief into a charitable foundation in his name, but some wounds don't close. They linger in the air, in the silence, in every photograph that's missing one brother. Then there's Spencer. Yes, that's Spencer Matthews, the infamous younger brother, reality TV's favorite disaster. While James buried himself in hedge funds and boardrooms, Spencer was out making headlines. Steroid scandals, tabloid flings, nightclub brawls. If James avoided the cameras, Spencer flirted with them. If James built control, Spencer built chaos. But what few ever realized, until now, was how tightly these dynamics wound themselves around Pippa's life. In 2022, Vogue Williams, Spencer's wife, dropped a carefully veiled comment on her podcast. She didn't mention Pippa by name, but she didn't have to. The message landed and everything shifted. Overnight, Pippa, once a constant presence at family gatherings, a sister-in-law in every sense, vanished from the Matthews family orbit. No birthday appearances, no holiday photos, just a polite, deafening absence. And behind all of it, quietly pulsing like a hidden engine, was the money. The Matthews fortune wasn't just wealth, it was legend. David Matthews, the patriarch, had clawed his way up from coal mines to Caribbean luxury. Eden Rock became his crown jewel, a paradise for the world's elite. But as the empire grew, so did the whispers. Shady deals, scandals, allegations. And James? His hedge fund days brought him dangerously close to the financial implosion of Heather Capital, a firm plagued by fraud investigations. He was never charged. But in families like these, mud doesn't need to stick to stain. The Matthews men had a pattern. David collected mansions. Spencer collected scandals. And James collected silence. He learned early that the best way to survive the storm was to never let it touch you. Bury the headlines. Redirect the questions. And above all, control the narrative to the world. It looked like Pippa had married into power, wealth, prestige, legacy. But the truth? She didn't just marry into a dynasty. She married into a maze of closed doors, whispered accusations, and secrets sealed tighter than any royal vault. And the deeper she went, the harder it became to find her way back out. Catherine's breaking point. Picture Catherine, Princess of Wales, in the soft light of her private study at Adelaide Cottage. The roses outside are blooming again. She's just returned to public life after months of grueling health battles. Her body is healing, slowly, bravely. But her soul? That's about to fracture in a way no camera will ever capture. The phone rings. It's Pippa. What follows is a conversation so raw, so heavy, that palace staff would later say it left Catherine utterly inconsolable. To understand the way of that moment, you have to understand the bond they shared. Catherine and Pippa weren't just sisters. They were soul-bound. In the quiet village lanes of Bucklebury, they rode ponies together, whispered secrets under starry skies, and dreamed of futures wrapped in love, not crowns. Through every scandal, every brutal headline, every flash of paparazzi bulbs, Pippa had stood like a shield, unflinching, loyal, fierce. When Catherine was hospitalized with hyperemesis during her pregnancies, Pippa held her hand in the sterile white rooms. When tabloids tore Catherine apart for being too polished, too reserved, too perfect, Pippa whispered in her ear at royal galas, "I've got your back." She meant it, always had. So when her voice cracked on the other end of the line that afternoon, when she finally let the mask slip and admitted what her marriage had truly become, Catherine didn't just hear the sorrow. She felt it in her marrow. "Why didn't you tell me?" she kept repeating through rising panic. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Pippa had been suffering in silence, trapped in a golden cage, performing happiness to the cameras while her heart quietly broke behind the gates of a mansion. And Catherine? She'd missed it, all of it, while she herself battled illness and tried to stay strong for George, Charlotte, and Louis. She hadn't seen her sister slipping away. She just kept crying. A palace aide revealed. Not the soft, royal kind of tears. Not the dab your eyes with a handkerchief tears. No, this was a storm. Wrenching sobs. She felt like she had failed the one person who had always stood beside her. That night, William found his wife sitting on the floor of their children's nursery, quietly watching Charlotte and Louis sleep. Her eyes were red. Her hands trembled. She told him she couldn't bear the thought of her own children feeling they couldn't come to each other, said a family friend. Pippa's silence had shaken her. Mayer questioned everything about love, protection, and sisterhood. The princess who never crumbles? She shattered, not for a nation, not for duty, but for her sister, for the girl who used to braid her hair and chase her through meadows barefoot, for the woman now locked inside a marriage that looked like a castle, but felt like a prison. And deep down, Catherine knew if this could happen to Pippa, it could happen to anyone, even a future queen. The financial pressures. They say money doesn't buy happiness. In Pippa Middleton's case, it bought misery, with a £15 million price tag and a gilded cage she never saw coming. When party pieces collapsed, it wasn't just a business loss. It was a family implosion. £2.6 million in debt. Years of work, dreams and pride, gone. The very company that paid for Catherine's education, that built the Middleton name from modest roots to high society, was now reduced to bankruptcy notices and unpaid invoices. Creditors circled like vultures over the ashes of a legacy. And yet, just a few miles away, James Matthews, Pippa's billionaire husband, watched in silence. For a man worth billions, the solution was simple. Write a check, rescue the in-laws, preserve their dignity. But he didn't. He let them drown. Quietly, calculatedly. It wasn't about the money, said a friend close to the family. It was about control. Because James Matthews didn't build a fortune by being generous. Every pound in his empire represented leverage, influence, power. And while his wife watched her parents' life's work crumble, James stayed still, cold, composed, unmoved. This is the part no one saw behind the velvet ropes and paparazzi flashes, the ski trips to Verbier, the sun-soaked escapes to Eden Rock, the couture gowns and curated smiles. From the outside, it looked perfect, but Pippa had learned the most brutal rule of marrying extreme wealth. When someone else holds the purse strings, they hold your freedom. She couldn't make a donation to her favorite charity without a conversation, couldn't help her parents without permission, couldn't even repaint a room without a financial summit. The woman who once authored a lifestyle book called Celebrate found herself asking for approval to buy flowers, not because the money wasn't there, but because it wasn't hers. Friends began to notice subtle changes. Her fashion, once bold, playful, iconic, became repetitive, not from financial constraint, but from something deeper. Fatigue, exhaustion. Every purchase had to be explained, every expense defended. The mental calculations of life for the numbers man were slowly draining the color from her world. She went from being Pippa Middleton, one longtime friend confided, to being Mrs. James Matthews. And in his world, wives don't need their own credit cards. It wasn't a lack of money that broke her spirit. It was a quiet, daily reminder that it wasn't hers to touch. And piece by piece, she disappeared behind the wealth she thought would set her free, living separate lives. The photographs tell the story James Matthews has spent years trying to keep hidden. December 2023, Westminster Abbey, Catherine's Christmas carol service. Pippa arrives alone, her smile polite but hollow. January 2024, a charity gala supporting children's health. Solo again. March, her nephew's birthday party. No James, not even a whispered excuse. But it's the photos where they are together that speak the loudest. Body language expert Judy James analyzed their most recent appearances. Her verdict? The physical distance is pronounced. Where once they touched naturally, a hand at the small of the back, fingers gently linked. Now there's space. Too much space. They stand like acquaintances. Colleagues, not a married couple. And those closest to her could see the transformation unfolding in real time. Pippa, once a woman who lit up every room she entered, had dimmed. Her signature colors, vibrant corals, soft florals, elegant blues, were replaced by grays, blacks, muted tones that mirrored her fading spirit. Her laughter, once effortless and infectious, had grown rare. Even her posture betrayed her, shoulders slowly curling inward, as if shielding herself from blows no one else could see. "She's disappearing," Catherine reportedly told William one evening. "My sister is vanishing right in front of me." And James? His absence wasn't loud. It was quieter than that, more brutal. He was physically there, at the table in the house, but emotionally gone. Conversations turned into schedules. Dinners became rituals of silence, broken only by the faint scrape of silverware. James would retreat nightly to his study for urgent business, taking hours to return. Often, he never did. Pippa would go to bed alone. Again, even the Matthews family WhatsApp thread, the once lively group where Pippa shared photos, jokes, warm check-ins, fell silent. What had been daily turned to weekly, then monthly. When Spencer announced Vogue's third pregnancy, Pippa responded 12 hours later. A single emoji. No warmth, no excitement, just cold obligation. And the children? They noticed. Little Arthur began asking questions. Why is Daddy always working? Grace stopped running to greet him. And baby Rose, well, she hadn't known him enough to miss him. The Matthews millions couldn't buy what those children needed most. A father who showed up, who sat on the floor and built blocks, who stayed for bedtime stories. The saddest part, their nanny whispered, was watching Mrs. Matthews try not to cry while explaining where Daddy was. She'd tell them he had very important meetings, that he was helping lots of people, but children know. They always know. And behind those walls, beneath the designer curtains and luxury rugs, a family was quietly falling apart. And no amount of money in the world could hold it together. The moment everything changed. June 14th, 2025. Mark it, because that was the day Pippa Middleton finally said the word she'd swallowed for far too long. Enough. It didn't come during a crisis or courtroom showdown. No, the spark was small, almost laughably ordinary. A village summer fete, the kind with bunting strung between oak trees and children chasing bees around jam stalls. Pippa had asked James to join her, not for a press appearance, not for prestige, just to be there, as her husband, as a father. His reply? I have real work to do. Real work. As if her life, raising 3 children, supporting charities, managing a home, writing books, showing up for people, wasn't real. As if her world was a soft hobby orbiting around a serious one, a toy life beside a titanic one. And that's when something inside her broke. That evening, in a moment that would change the course of her story, Pippa picked up the phone and called Catherine. No rehearsed pleasantries, no royal filter, just the truth, raw and shivering. She spoke about the loneliness, about the constant corrections in front of guests, about the silences at dinner, about feeling more like an unpaid assistant than a wife, a ghost of herself. I don't recognize me anymore, she sobbed. I look in the mirror and there's a stranger wearing my face. And Catherine listened, really listened, As her sister peeled back the layers of marriage that looked perfect from the outside but was inside a quiet storm of erasure and control, she heard how James had dismissed her in front of the children, correcting her like a nanny, how he'd turned their relationship into something cold, contractual, how, unbelievably, he begun the legal process to bypass Pippa entirely, ensuring the Glen Affric title would go directly to their son. She wouldn't even be Lady Glen Affric. Not someday. Not ever. She would be nothing. A placeholder. A vessel. A footnote in the Matthews dynasty she had helped build. Now being erased from. That's when Catherine shattered. Not just tears, but devastation. Guilt. Rage. This was the same sister who held her train at Westminster Abbey, who whispered strength into her ear during the worst days of palace life. The woman who had stood behind her every step was now standing alone. "Come home," Catherine said, voice trembling but firm. "Just come home." What followed wasn't just a conversation. It was an uprising. Because when a Middleton woman decides she's done, the earth moves. And when two Middleton sisters unite, one a future queen, the other a mother scorned, no dynasty is safe. No title secure. Not even a billionaire can outmaneuver a woman reclaiming her name. The world saw a smile at the next public event. But behind it, there was fire. And for the first time in years, it was Pippa's own, the uncertain future. The war isn't over. It's only just begun. Pippa Middleton now stands at the edge of a decision no mother, no sister, no woman should ever have to make. Stay in a marriage that's draining the life from her soul, or walk away and face the wrath of a billionaire scorned. James Matthews doesn't lose. Not in business, not in public, and certainly not in love. His entire empire is built on control, quiet, ruthless, calculated. If divorce becomes reality, it won't be civil. It'll be war, brutal, expensive, played out in headlines that will strip every layer of privacy from her life. The custody battle alone could destroy her, because for all his charm, James is one true weapon, infinite resources. But this time, Pippa isn't walking into battle alone. Behind her stands a family stronger than any fortune. Catherine, more than a sister, more than a princess, is her shield, her rock. And William, the future king, has quietly thrown his weight behind Pippa. Even King Charles, famously measured in these matters, has reportedly told close aides he will offer whatever support necessary. The irony, a royal source whispered, is that James wanted the royal glow. Now he's finding out what happens when you break the heart of someone the royals love. At the heart of this storm are three small souls. Arthur, old enough now to notice the tension in the air. Grace, still young enough to believe in bedtime magic, but confused by her mother's tears. And little Rose, blissfully unaware that the ground beneath her is beginning to shift. Pippa's fear isn't public embarrassment. It isn't even losing the Matthews name. It's what this fight could do to her children. The ache of knowing they'll one day ask hard questions she can't answer without breaking. But behind the scenes, the pieces are moving. She's been seen entering the offices of one of London's most feared divorce attorneys. Her parents, humiliated after the party pieces collapse, have begun shielding their remaining assets. And Catherine? She's been at Pippa's side almost daily, watching the children, sleeping over, helping lay foundations for something quietly powerful. They're not flailing, they're planning. And while James continues his immaculate performance, charming, composed, in control, those closest to him are starting to notice a shift. The longer nights, the shorter temper, the silence that feels less like strategy and more like panic. Because the question no longer is, will Pippa leave? The question is, when will she stay and accept the title, Lady Glen Affric, while living in a gilded prison, a footnote in someone else's empire? Or will she reclaim her name, Philippa Charlotte Middleton, the woman who once captivated the world, not because of who she married, but because of who she was? The smart money? It's on the Middleton sisters. Because when Catherine cries for you, when she fights for you, when the future Queen of England stands in your corner and says, "You deserve better," even billionaires learn the hard way. Some things can't be bought, and some women, can be broken. So, what do you think is really happening behind the palace walls? Will Pippa break free or stay for the children? And how will this impact Catherine as she steps closer to the crown? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. If this story surprised you, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more royal truths they don't want you to know. Until next time, keep questioning everything.